the election. Massimo Calabresi in that article was also first to report that intelligence officials were looking into Russia using Facebook to infiltrate the U.S. election. This was Calabresi in Time magazine back in May. Quote, intelligence officials have found that Moscow's agents bought ads on Facebook to target specific populations with propaganda. Now, that makes sense that would do that, right? We understand they were running this influence operation on Trump's behalf, right? They're running this influence operation to benefit Trump and hurt Clinton. We've understood that now for months. So it makes sense that they would use American social media. It does raise all sorts of interesting questions about whether or not they needed help to do it. So it would look like American stuff. So it would also target the right American Facebook users to have the maximum effect on the vote. It raises very interesting questions about Facebook accepting that money to influence the U.S. election without noticing that it was from a foreign source. But Facebook came out and told Time magazine in May that it didn't happen. Quote, a Facebook official says the company has no evidence of that occurring. So Calabresi says intelligence officials have found that Moscow's agents bought ads on Facebook to target specific populations with propaganda. Facebook comes out and says no, the company has no evidence of that occurring. All right, well then in July, McClatchy reports that, quote, investigators at the House and Senate Intelligence Committees and the Justice Department are investigating whether the Trump campaign's digital operation, overseen by Jared Kushner, helped guide Russia's sophisticated vote targeting and fake news attacks on Hillary Clinton in 2016. They cite several people familiar with the parallel inquiries. Peter Stone and Greg Gordon reported at McClatchy that Congressional and Justice Department investigators are focusing on whether Trump's campaign pointed Russian cyber operatives to certain voting jurisdictions in key states, areas where Trump's digital team and Republican operatives were spotting unexpected weakness in voter support for Hillary Clinton. And in that article, crucially, McClatchy spoke with the guy who had just left his post as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia at the Pentagon. So he's the senior Pentagon official responsible for Russia during the Russian attack on our election. And he told McClatchy in July, quote, there appears to have been significant cooperation between Russia's propaganda machine and individuals in the United States who were knowledgeable about where to target the disinformation. So McClatchy comes up with that in July, specifically citing investigators' interest in how the Kremlin was able to target millions of voters' Facebook accounts, not just down to swing states, but even down to key precincts. Very, very pointed accusation there, right? And that elicits, once again, a spate of denials from Facebook. Facebook, days after this McClatchy piece ran, they told Wired.com that they had found no evidence of Russian entities buying ads during the election. Then days later, it was CNN reporting that top Democrats on the Russia investigations, and Senator Mark Warner in particular on Senate Intel, they were convinced that Facebook holds the answers that investigators are looking for on the question of potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. CNN describes Senator Warner as convinced that Facebook can explain whether anyone from the Trump campaign helped Russians boost fake news articles on Facebook targeting Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. After that comes out, the Trump campaign itself says, no, that definitely didn't happen. The head of data operations who worked with Jared Kushner on the campaign comes out and says he was unaware of any Russian activity during the election at all. And then once again, Facebook itself comes out and says, no. This didn't happen. Facebook told CNN, quote, we have seen no evidence that Russian actors bought ads on Facebook in connection with the election. So this would appear to be a key part of what Russia did to try to skew the election toward Donald Trump. Right? This behavior by the Russians using American social media, specifically using Facebook, it's a key component of the investigation into whether or not they had any American help in it, whether any Americans knew what they were doing and let it go or cheered them on or even helped them do it. And for months now, really good reporters at outlets all over the country have been chasing this down. And the big hurdle in the middle of all this investigative reporting is that Facebook keeps saying, no. We know you think this happened. This didn't happen. Russians? What Russians? There were no Russians. For months, Facebook has denied this ever happened. Now, as of today, Facebook admits, okay, there were Russians. Today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Facebook released this kind of ungoogleable blog post with a headline that I'm currently forgetting, even as I'm reading it to you out loud. An update on information operations on Facebook. Despite that thrilling headline, what this means is that Facebook is now admitting, despite all its earlier repeated insistent denials, that in fact it has now positively identified thousands of ads during the presidential campaign as having originated in Russia. So that goes out at 4 p.m. And then Carol Leonnig and Tom Hamburger and Rosalind Helderman at the Washington Post, they were first to scoop on the story. Beyond the, frankly, anodyne, self-congratulatory statement by Facebook in which they basically intimate that the biggest threat here is to their own Facebook business policies that weren't followed. Kel Orr. After that statement from Facebook, Carol Leonnig and her colleagues at the Washington Post were actually able to get this much more helpful information from a Facebook official for their story. Quote, there is evidence that some of the accounts that Facebook now admits to, some of the accounts are linked to a troll farm in St. Petersburg, one that is referred to as the Internet Research Agency. So, I mean, again, the bottom line here, what this means now is that Facebook is finally confirming, after months of denying it, that Russian fake accounts were shunting political messaging into the U.S. election for months. And although they don't say it in their blog post, an official does admit to reporters working on this story now that some of those Russian posts were tied to something called the Internet Research Agency. And even though that sounds very generic, that is a specific and Googleable thing. The Internet Research Agency is cited in the intelligence community's report on the Russian attack on our election. They cite it essentially as a project of Russian military intelligence. This is from page 4 of the intelligence community's report. Russia used trolls as part of its influence efforts to denigrate Secretary Clinton. This effort amplified stories on scandals about Secretary Clinton. Who were those trolls exactly? Again, from the intelligence community report, quote, the likely financier of the so-called Internet Research Agency of professional trolls located in St. Petersburg. The financier of that is a close Putin ally with ties to Russian intelligence. So, Russian intelligence, again. It's sometimes, some of these nights you feel like you connect the dots. Sometimes you feel like, oh, it's one big dot. Russian intelligence officers overheard discussing their plans to disseminate negative news about Hillary Clinton last May. Guy with Russian military intelligence background turns up in Trump Tower last June. Russian intelligence cutouts start distributing stolen, hacked Democratic documents denigrating Hillary Clinton in July. Russian intelligence uses WikiLeaks to distribute stolen, hacked documents denigrating Hillary Clinton in the fall. And all along for months, Russian intelligence is using American social media companies, including Facebook. Facebook now finally admits to circulate information intended to influence the election. It's like 17 different dots that are all labeled. Intelligence, Russian intelligence, Russian intelligence. So this is a key part of the collusion narrative that was denied for months by this gigantic, powerful company. Now that Facebook is no longer denying it, now that everybody involved, except the Trump campaign, I think, admits to exactly what Russia did here, can we now look at what they did to see if they had help? If the Republican-led congressional investigations aren't looking into that now, they should have to explain why they're not. Because now there's really no more disagreement about what happened here. The only question is whether there were American Confederates involved. And it's now a very investigatable thing. The other reason this is important is for a very pedestrian and direct reason, which is that, as I mentioned, you can't spend foreign money to influence a U.S. election, even just on Facebook ads. And so this is evidence now, direct evidence confirmed by